it's something that has to be done because I go back to those original days, those founding days of doing this program. And I've said this a million times over the years that I watched as the lunchrooms that I was a part of, basically were just ripped apart. I watched high-priced right-wing mouthpieces invade my lunchroom, and I still remember to this day the first time I heard Limbaugh's name, and the guy who a brother Teamster, who told me that the union was holding him back, that he would make more money if the union wasn't there. It would be better. And I simply, kind of dumbfounded. And, amazingly, in the right response for the right moment, said, if that's true, why are you here? If there is something better out there, if there are better wages, hours, conditions, better opportunities, why are you still here? And that's been the curious thing, because I hear union members say this all the time. If we just didn't have this stinking union, it's because it's what they've been force fed over all of these years. It's what they've been. It's been constantly hammered into their ears. So now they take it as, yeah, I'm sufficiently wonderful that I should be a millionaire. And look, I would love if everybody was a millionaire. Not going to happen. Not right now. And right-wing talk radio, grievance radio, outrage radio that plays on people's anger, their fear, their frustrations. That's what's ripped us apart. And I've had a front row seat over all these years of look, my lunchroom being torn from being a unified place where workers' issues were agreed on, to being ripped apart, to now indoctrinated into this Trump fantasy death cult. And now more than ever, and unfortunately, I have a lot of communications with listeners, and thank you for the people who reach out to us. Now more than ever, we need to be talking about the things that we can agree on, and workers' rights should be that thing. Workers' rights should be that thing that pulls us back together. Because more than ever, I hear people saying, "Look, I'm working harder. I'm working longer. Things are getting harder. Things are getting more difficult to navigate. Life's getting much more complicated." And I think a lot of it is we complicate this ourselves because we've got politicians. And this is where the understanding of, and I go back to, and I say this all the time, I go back to my high school civics teacher, who was very clear: government decides who gets what. And when you think about it in that frame, government decides who gets what. Our government decides who the winners and losers are through policy, through the legislative choices that we make, through the executive orders that are made, decide who gets what. And for a very long time, think, Reagan era forward, the wealth class of this country has gotten everything they've wanted. Massive tax breaks, deregulation, all of the things that built a solid, prosperous working class has been eviscerated. And through all of these right-wing bloviators, they have made it sound like this is in our best interest. If we give the wealthy all the money and all the breaks, it'll trickle down on us, and some of it will flow upon our heads. It never happens. And we're sold these ideas, privatizing our water and our sewers and our parking garages and our turnpikes and our, you name it. Privatizing, our nursing homes and our hospitals, and privatizing all of the things that used to be and had been built as the commons in this country has been privatized, profitized, and, well, rationed. And we're told that that's somehow good for us. And we were sold this idea that if we give it to the wealthy, we give it to the corporate interests, they're smart. They're going to know how to run it more efficiently. It's going to be better. It's going to be cheaper. It's going to be utopia. We're going to get better services, cheaper, and it's going to be great. And none of that ever works, does it? It seems like we're being sold snake oil over and over and over again. And the right-wing outrage machine, they never back up. They never apologize. They never talk about the failures. And this is what Reaganomics, supply-side voodoo Reaganomics has brought us. So all these years later, again, I think back to 17 years ago when we started this program. And the first interview I did alone was with Senator, then Congressman Bernie Sanders, talking about these very issues. How do we ensure that the working class gets a fair shake? How do we ensure that workers who work hard, play by the rules, actually get ahead? This is one of those moments. But there's so much time, energy, money invested into keeping us pitted against each other and divided, especially on this stuff, that we're doomed. And I look at Labor Day weekend, the fact that someone like Doug Mastriano, who is a state senator here in Pennsylvania, was at the January 6th insurrection, held a kangaroo court hearing not far from where I sit in Gettysburg. Of course, nobody under oath didn't swear on that Bible they love so much, told a bunch of BS. He showed up reportedly to a Labor Day event. This is a guy who has said he will sign right to work. This is a guy who has said he will attack the ability of working people to join and form unions. It's a guy who's against the minimum wage. You go down the list of all of the things that he is against, that working people should be on the side of, and it's really quite amazing. This guy is probably one of the most dangerous candidates in the country, and to have the audacity to show up on the workers' holiday is kind of remarkable. But it shows that they have there's no bottom here. There's no shame in these people. There's no backing up. And the only thing that they understand is pure unadulterated power and control. And the sad reality is that there are so many working people who see that kind of appearance of the fighter, the tough guy, as something positive, without understanding that the fight is against them. The bullying is going to be them. I mean, for right now, it may be the people that you hate that they're focused on first. I mean, he did dress up in his Confederate costume. You know, it wasn't even Halloween, and he was dancing around in his Confederate soldier uniform. But eventually they're coming for you. And I talk to my union buddies. Reality is, while he may hate the same people that you hate, while he may want to intimidate and bully the same people that you want to intimidate and bully, you're on the list too. Because once they pass that no rights at work agenda that they want, the right to work for less legislation, once that happens here in Pennsylvania, we know what happens in states that do that. Wages go down, benefits go away, working conditions get worse. For the working people of this state, life will get worse. The standard of living will continue to go in the negative direction. And that's what conservative policy has brought us. It's that simple. And it doesn't just end there. They want every part of your life controlled. And now remember, these are the people saying, Joe Biden and the Democrats, they blah, 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 blah. But if you listen to what they're saying, you listen to the words coming out of their mouth. For instance, today you've got the Massachusetts primaries going on. The ringing endorsement by Donald Trump of this Jeff Deal guy. He says, Jeff's a proven fighter who successfully pushes back on the ultra-liberal extremists and who has driven them a bit too wild too because they can't figure him out. He'll rule your state with an iron fist, and he'll do what has to be done. And you go, what does that mean? And who is it meant for? It's meant for working people. That's you. That's me. That's all of us. Because eventually we're all in the shark tank. But that's the reality. But for all the folks who sent well wishes and congratulations, 17 years, kind of an accomplishment. Very happy about that. Hoping to add another year to that here in the coming year of being able to come on and talk to everybody and interact. I'm looking forward to it. Love to hear your thoughts. Give us a call, 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. Also email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you've got a question, thought, comment, want to hear it. Again, miss any of the program, podcast, grab that. Gonna take a quick break, right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk. If you're a fan of the show, you've heard our labor history in 2 segments, and you can hear them on the radio pretty much anywhere in the U.S. Labor history has never been more important than it is right now. So here's what we'd like you to do. Tell a teacher. Tell a teacher that labor history is important and that they can get digestible 2-minute lessons that are absolutely free. Free to download, free to use, free to share. Tell a teacher to go to thericksmithshow.com/history and help us put labor back where it belongs, in the classroom. You know, generations of American workers fought, bled, and died to build the American way of life. It's our job to keep their stories alive. Go tell a teacher that we're here to help them do just that. Find us at thericksmithshow.com/history today.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. Make sure you check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. We're going to go to Christopher on, what is this, line 3, I guess. Chris, how are you today?
Good, Rick. How are you tonight?
Living the dream. What's on your mind, brother?
Good. Not just congratulations, 17 years. That's a big accomplishment. I was off a couple of weeks, but I am a Teamster, 705, and I am pro-union. And I support Donald Trump, but I think we can agree on the union movement. I'm 100% pro-union.
Okay, so let me stop you here then. Donald Trump has said, and he's on record saying he's all in favor of right to work. How do you square that?
I mean, I'm conflicted on right to work for sure. I mean, I don't have all the answers on any of these issues, but the thing I want to say was
this isn't one of those I have all the answers, Christopher. This is it's going to make your union weaker. It's going to make your ability to fight for better wages, hours, conditions much weaker. It's going to divide your workplace in a much worse way. And we know, because we've seen states that have done this, it makes wages go down, conditions get worse, health and retirement security go away. This is a real problem. This, for me, is the central tenet of why I have a problem with Republicans in this moment. I wish there were pro-labor Republicans again. There just aren't.
Okay. Like, if you understand the history of Teamsters,
I do.
There was murders. There was fights, fires, burnings. I mean, look at the movie Hoffa.
It's not just the Teamsters, though. Let's not just say the Teamsters.
I'm just saying, in general, unions had to fight and claw for everything they got. And I think that a lot of the American labor movement has become soft and just say that they deserve it, and they don't really have to fight. I work for UPS. I'm like, why is not Amazon being organized? Why is not FedEx organized? Why isn't the union going out and doing these things? I don't understand.
You do know that they are working on that. You do realize that our labor laws are so ossificated and broken that it's almost impossible in this day to do that, especially when you're talking about how much time, energy, money, and effort's gone into pushing an anti-union message. I mean, look, when you've got 71% of the population who thinks unions are a good thing and have this approval, you got 60 million people who would vote to join a union tomorrow, but yet you've got Starbucks workers and you've got Amazon workers who are probably not going to get a contract in the next 10 years, given how broken our laws are.
Walk off the job. Amazon workers have all the power. It's like that Ants movie. Once they realize we outnumber them, we're screwed. Walk off the job. You have to put in the hard work and say, we're not going to tolerate this anymore. That's what the unions did back in the day. It wasn't like nobody was giving them money. Those people were starving, but they stayed on that picket line till the end, until they got what we wanted.
No, we don't disagree on this, Christopher, at all.
That's why I say we can agree on these things, Rick. And like I said, if Amazon puts a picket line out, UPS trucks are not crossing that picket line. So I mean, the power is there. You just have to seize it and realize that we outnumber those like you say. I mean, look at Jeff Bezos, right? He owns the Washington Post, right? So, in my opinion, he puts out all this liberal stuff. Yeah, he's pro this, but then he screws over his workers. So it's like, but the Democratic Party won't call him out because
they've called him out.
I don't understand it.
They've called him out, and
enough.
No, it's never enough. It's never gonna for you and me. It's never gonna be enough, Christopher. Ever.
So why? Why do they not do it? Money. It's always about money, right?
And
again, whether you're Republican or Democrat, they take the money.
Yep, there you go. Good.
That's just
good
the
point.
reality of it.
I agree with you, Christopher. I appreciate the call. I got to move along. Let's move over to Alice on line 2. Alice, how are we doing today? Alice, you there?
I'm here.
What's on your mind?
I just wanted to say that I thought it was rather amazing that all of these Republicans all of a sudden are cutting back on some of their anti-union rhetoric and scrubbing their websites of all their being supported by Donald Trump and, being against abortion.
It is interesting, isn't it?
It is. It is indeed. And I think that some of them are thinking that there's some things they best keep to themselves until they get, elected.
It's when they speak out loud that you find out who they are. And we should believe them. You're right.
Exactly.
Appreciate it, Alice.
But, bye.
Thanks so much. No, and this is where, again, not everybody's perfect. But right now, I look at the people who are the center of the Republican Party. Trouble. These are people who are anti-worker. And look, I agree with Christopher there. People should be taken to the streets. I'm all in favor of a general strike. Let's go to line 4. We got Gary from Minnesota on line 4. Gary, what's on your mind?
Oh, just a few things. Republicans, they don't believe in government for us, but they sure do for the rich. They can't give them enough. And, we never had a middle class in this country till Roosevelt's New Deal. And when they talk about privatizing, they're privatizing all the stuff the New Deal gave us. And so the middle class we had before Roosevelt was just a tiny amount of people in between. But what I called also about was, this environmental stuff. We were trying to get off of oil many years ago, and the big money and the oil money got in the way. But I called some of the Democratic candidates or senators and stuff, and I told them for the campaign we should show Trump and the other Republicans running down climate change. It didn't happen. It was a hoax and all that. And then run these ads of what's going on with the floods, hurricanes, storms, droughts, and fires and everything. How's that sound?
Yeah, I mean, anything that's going to hopefully wake people up. But look, I think on that issue, I think people are in their camps already. You're not going to get some of the diehard Republicans who are going to come along. I just don't think you're going to.
Well, I'll tell you, some of them are probably waking up a little bit down there in the flooded southeast where somebody Republican get elected. But we'll see. Good. So I just thought that might be a good idea.
No, it's a great idea, Gary. Appreciate the call, man. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Look, at the end of the day, the more we talk about issues, the more we focus on moving forward and making lives better, the better I think we are going to be, and holding both sides accountable. As I said, I remember a time where there were Republicans who were pro-labor. In fact, we have one on the show quite often. My friend, former Ohio Congressman Bob Ney, was the chairman of the Oversight Committee. He was one of the Gingrich Contract on America folks, and we agreed on some things and disagreed on most others. But he was solidly a pro-union, pro-worker Republican. They're gone. This idea that they exist, not happening. Let's get Nick on line 1 on the line here before we take a break. Nick, what's on your mind, brother?
Hey, Rick. Yeah, definitely a lot on my mind. Whether it's the student loan debt cancellation that debtors won of 10 to 20,000 depending on things, and the annoyance of means testing when it comes to it, and having folks have to apply to it, or it's the win of folks like us with the Bucks Cancel Lunch Debt Coalition to get like $20,000 of lunch debt in a Bucks County, school district. It's pretty awesome. Both of those things are on my mind. So.
No, good stuff. I think the debt cancellation is something that is a step in the right direction. I got some problems with it. I think it should have been more. I think we should have done more to fix the problem down the road. I would have liked to have seen, something bigger. But this is again a step in the right direction. I know that a lot of people losing their minds, but I think it's a step in the right direction.
Yeah, I can definitely see that and agree, and I also see it as something where it's it's really showcasing that Biden does have the power to actually cancel all student debt, as something like myself or those within the debt collective or other groups have been saying for a while in that case. And then also with the lunch debt thing, almost the same thing, that school districts, they do have the power to just cancel this lunch debt, and something in which over the pandemic it was actually pretty much free for every single kid throughout the United States. So continuing that fight, and hopeful more folks continue with that.
Yeah, appreciate the call, Nick. Thanks, man.
Yeah,
good update. Again, it comes back down to policy for me. It comes down to I don't have the hat. I didn't buy the shirt. I'm not on a team right now. If there were a pro union Republican who was on the right side on issues, I would support them. There just hasn't been one. And if there is one, and I always ask this: if there's a Republican out there who is pro worker, I want to know. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Let us know, by all means, because it's kind of like where's Waldo? I think it's like finding the golden unicorn that's going to be laying golden eggs. I don't think you're finding one. Love to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Gonna take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1934. That was the day that became known as Bloody Thursday. 7 striking workers were shot dead and another 30 wounded at the Chicola Mill in Honapath, South Carolina. The Great Textile Strike of 1934 had started on September 1st. The 22-day strike spanned the eastern United States from New England to Georgia and involved close to 500,000 workers. The main issue was the dreaded stretch-out, increased workloads at the same or even reduced pay rates. Striking textile workers implemented the flying picket squad tactic employed by Minneapolis Teamsters earlier that summer. Hundreds drove from mill to prevent scabbing. Mill executives across the Piedmont were stunned and terrified at the strike's effectiveness and the workers' militancy. Strikers at the Chicola Mill had formed solid picket lines at the gate when scabs and special deputies, armed by the mill owners, opened fire. All 7 were shot in the back as they tried to escape the hail of bullets. According to a New York Times article the following day, the killings marked, quote, the beginning of the second bloody phase of the strike as one town after another reported completion of preparations to resist the flying squads and the picketing activity of the strikers. Frank Beecham, the grandson of Chicola Mill owner and mayor of Honapath, Dan Beecham, has worked to unearth the history of the massacre and apologize for his grandfather's cruelty. He notes that, as in many southern mill towns, after the strike went down to defeat, those who struck were fired and blacklisted. Those who retained their jobs essentially took a vow of silence, never to discuss the strike or the massacre again. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
For more than a year, America's corporate chieftains have been moaning about the Great Resignation, the recent phenomena of workers just up and quitting their jobs. And now comes quiet quitting. Workers who don't leave their jobs but only do what they're hired to do, quietly rejecting the endless extra unpaid tasks and weekend assignments that bosses try to pile on. What's at work in the heads of all these workers? Simple, barked one boss way back in 1894. Nobody wants to work. And here's an anti-New Deal baron in 1940 snorting that trouble is everybody is on relief or a pension. Nobody wants to work. Then in 52 came the same refrain. Everybody is, quote, too damn lazy and nobody wants to work anymore. Year after year, the exact same wail is repeated from on high, including this group gripe expressed in a corporate survey this year. 1 in 5 executive leaders agree that no one wants to work. Given the historic continuum of executive suite disdain for working stiffs, it's no surprise that the top dogs are blaming sluggish workers for today's rampant job dissatisfaction. But it's both hilarious and pathetic that high-dollar bosses are so inept at employee relations that they can't keep the rank and file on the job, much less happy. Their response has been to put a silly Band-Aid on this serious problem. They've created new executive positions like Chief People Officer and hired consulting firms with such names as Woohoo and Happy Limited to come up with treats, trinkets, and gimmicks trying to make the workplace a playscape. Beer tastings, ping pong games, meditation, a Lizzo concert, company water bottles, wine Wednesdays. This is Jim Hightower saying, memo to CEOs, try decent pay and benefits, rational scheduling, meaningful goals, and personal respect. In a word, dignity.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So some good news. You know, I've been a little concerned, little worried that the Biden administration would succumb to the pressure put on by the right to do away with the tariffs. And it's not just folks on the right. I mean, there's some folks on the left who screaming about we've got to get rid of the tariffs to lower inflation, even though I don't think that would really have anything to do with it. But the good news is the Biden administration, they're going to keep the tariffs on the Chinese imports, at least for now, and that is a good thing. And here to share some thoughts on why that's a good thing, I've asked our good friend Scott Paul to come talk with us. Scott is the president of the Alliance for American Manufacturing, AmericanManufacturing.org, their website. Scott, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, Rick, it is good to be with you as always.
So this is a good thing, right?
Yeah, it's a good thing, and you teed it up perfectly. I mean, this would have been an easy policy for Biden to have discarded because it was a Trump policy. It was unpopular with economists and with editorial boards and with the corporate Democrats, and it would have been popular with some Republicans who didn't agree with Trump on trade policy. But we argued all along, I think correctly, that while the tariffs are a blunt instrument, they're necessary, and they're one of the best tools we have to manage the unfair trade relationship that we have with China. And the rationale for putting them into place, the fact that there's been massive unfair trade practices, including intellectual property theft, and the way in which products are made, is something that most Americans, if they saw the process, would not want to support. So the rationale was there, and China was asked to do a couple of things, and they didn't do it, and the CCP didn't do it, and so Biden's kept them in place. I mean, we were one of dozens of associations and domestic businesses and unions that urged the administration to continue these tariffs, which are on about $300 billion worth of imports coming from China. And Rick, it's not just doing tariffs for the sake of tariffs. I mean, there has been some evidence that the tariffs, in some ways, are working.
Right.
They're diversifying supply chains. Some of them are moving to other countries. Some of them are coming back to the United States, which is good. And we have seen a manufacturing boom in the United States during the Biden administration, which has been in many ways unprecedented and extraordinary, something we haven't seen for 4 or 5 decades here in the U.S.
No, it's good stuff. Now, again, the tariffs, one of the things that I agreed with the Trump administration on, my knock against it is it was a lone kind of thing. It wasn't part of a broader comprehensive plan Are we moving toward a broader comprehensive plan to use this tool more effectively? How do you see this playing in the coming months, since they're going to leave this in place?
Yeah, yeah. Well, that is a good question. And you know, if there was an easy solution to untangling ourselves with the mess we got in with China, with respect to shifting so much production over there, we would have found that easy solution by now. It just doesn't exist. It's going to take hard work. I do think this administration, more than any other, is committed to starting that work. And so part of that, as you mentioned, was keeping the tariffs in place. And that provides a little room for U.S. industry to grow. But the other part, and you mentioned this as well, is to invest in our domestic manufacturing, both through supply side and demand side incentives, and using all the tools at our disposal, things like Buy America, things like investing in our infrastructure, things like making sure our clean energy future is made in America, things like ensuring that semiconductors, which are critical to so many different products, as well as our national security, that we have the capacity to make far more of those in the United States than we do right now, to prevent the kind of shortages and supply chain disruptions that we've seen over the last couple of years. So I do think that there are policies in place that there weren't before, which is helpful. And there's also evidence that some of these policies are beginning to work. We have a long way to go, but it seems like that one-way ship to China is starting to turn around a little bit,
Yeah.
and that we're seeing some of this come back.
Yeah, I mean, Bloomberg reported that new construction starts have soared something like 116%
Yeah,
over the
it's
past years. I
unbelievable.
mean, that's never been that way in my lifetime. It's always been the other direction. So to see this, impressive.
Yeah, yeah, it really is. I mean, 116%. That's the growth in construction of new factories in the United States year over year, which is an unbelievable surge. That's like something that you're surging up for to prepare for armed conflict or something like that. I mean, it is really nuts how much it has grown. And it is, again, this isn't organic. I mean, part of this is because our economy is healthier, but part of this is because we have policies in place to make sure that the next generation of things that we're making in the US or that we're deploying in the United States and that we're also researching in the United States are going to be made in the United States as well. And that's things like our electric vehicles or lithium ion batteries or more of our solar panels. And so you've seen a ton of these new factory announcements from names that are familiar to everybody, from Ford to Intel to even foreign-owned companies like Samsung that are choosing to invest in the United States. And that means a whole lot more manufacturing jobs that are going to be open and available coming down the pike.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about the policies. The Inflation Reduction Act. They're saying because of that, we've now got this new first solar plant going to be built, and then you
Right.
look at the infrastructure bill. The Corning plant going to be built out of that. The Chips Act. You're going to get this massive chips facility in Columbus, Ohio, and building other places. The fact that policy is moving us in a direction to reshore our manufacturing, because I do think we're kind of in a war kind of footing coming out of the pandemic and realizing just how badly broken our supply chains are. We may not be at armed conflict, but we're kind of at a war footing, because at least I hope people are waking up that we're at a serious disadvantage as a country given the way things are structured right now.
That's exactly right. We certainly are. And it's things that are important to our national security, like those semiconductors and other products as well. And also everyday things that we depend on, right? And we've seen this whipsaw effect that started in a lot of ways even before the pandemic with any kind of disruption, whether it was a natural disaster or even power outages that show just how fragile our supply chains are. And so I do think that a couple of things happen. One is that, some businesses, not all, Rick, but some businesses had an epiphany that said, you know what, there's a way around this, and it's actually pretty simple. You make the products where they're consumed. And in the United States, we consume 20% of the world's stuff. We overconsume. We're 5% of the world's population. We consume 20% of the world's stuff. So it's a good place to locate a factory, and you can cut out a lot of the shipping. But I think the even more important factor here is that there's now policy backing all of this. So there's a lot of presidents who would talk about made in America, or who would say, I love manufacturing. But until you get the policy right, you really aren't true blue. And I think Biden has done a great job so far.
Yeah.
Starts with infrastructure, and you mentioned the Inflation Reduction Act, the CHIPS Act, and all of that. And if you package all of that together, you have the formation of a nascent industrial policy in the United States, something, again, we haven't seen for more than a generation.
No, look, I look at someone like Trump, who for 4 years talked about Infrastructure Week almost every week. I mean, we had tons of displays and cute photo ops of him in trucks and playing with stuff, but never any real action. We had tons of talk of reshoring jobs and spreading a fantasy that he alone could bring our manufacturing back, and it never came to fruition. And yet the guy who can barely get out a sentence, and look, I love Joe Biden, not a great orator, but on policy, he's killing it.
Yeah, he is. And my hope is that he will sell this across the country, because all the work that we have done would suggest that these policies are going to be wildly popular. And there's really nothing, and I think you would agree with this. There's really nothing like an uplifting moment for a community than when a factory says it's going to locate there, right? It's kind of like a country winning the Olympics, or someone winning the lottery. In a way, it transforms that community.
Yeah, it means jobs, it means economic activity, and more importantly, it means identity. And this is part of some of the things that we've been talking about for a while. When we went through that whole 80s and 90s deindustrialization, you left communities hollow. And you look at them now, and they're broken places, abandoned, with all of the negative effects of job loss and unemployment and broken families and drug abuse and all kinds of stuff, that this could help maybe begin to heal and give not just people but communities a mission again.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about that, Rick, because the societal costs, in addition to the direct economic costs of those factory closures, were extraordinary, and they're still being felt, and they're rippling throughout society. And I'm not going to pretend like one new factory announcement is going to erase all of that and make a community whole again, but it is certainly a step on that road. But we have a lot of work ahead of this. And as exciting as the electric vehicle revolution is, and it's even more exciting when it's made in America, and we do have policies that are going to make sure that a lot of it is made in America, there's also a simple truth here, is that it's going to take fewer workers to make electric vehicles than it does the combustion engine. It's a simpler product. It doesn't have as long of a supply chain. And so we are going to have to find other markets, other products that we're able to make in the United States. And again, clean energy is a great example of that, whether it's wind turbines or solar panels or any of the other aspects of renewable energy that we're going to need and depend on coming ahead. We have to put that together. And this is also the important thing. Biden can't just say, okay, we're done now. We've done manufacturing. Let's move on to something else. This is going to take sustained effort, and it's going to take sustained trade enforcement. It's going to take more investment. I mean, the CHIPS Act for semiconductors should be the beginning of this, not the end.
Right.
Because there were a lot of other sectors out there where we don't make enough of the product, and we are still very, very vulnerable and exposed, and we need to reshore that as quickly as we possibly can.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show with Scott Paul, president of the Alliance for American Manufacturing. AmericanManufacturing.org is their website if you want to check out the work that they do. We'll get links out on social media. Now, here's the thing. Here's what gets me, and here's what scares me. we've talked about clean energy in the past. We're talking about manufacturing policy. We're talking about a direction that the country is moving that I think is on the right path, is moving us in a direction that's going to make people's lives better, going to help heal communities, do all this stuff. We've got elections coming up. And I look to the Republican side of things, who didn't give overwhelming support to any of this stuff. In fact, some of it didn't support at all. And my mind goes back to 1980 and Reagan ripping the solar panels off the White House. And my fear is we're doing all this good stuff, we're moving in all the right directions, and someone, I don't know, with an orange tint comes in and rips it all out from under us.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, there's a real danger, without being partisan here, but just purely based on policy, that it could happen even sooner than that. I just read today that part of the package that Kevin McCarthy and Republicans in the House are putting together is something called the Commitment to America, as opposed to the Contract for America, right? So just rebranding it. But one of the elements of that is rolling back the Build Back Better spending, which we were just talking about, has had extraordinary benefits already for blue states, purple states, red states. So I don't think that's going to be a popular thing, but that is a danger. And if that's something that House Republicans are running on, then that's something they're going to probably try to do if they should take back the House. And so we have to be incredibly vigilant as we move ahead, and we also have to make sure that people know the elected officials who support pro-manufacturing, pro-industrial worker policies, and thosh want to roll things back.
Yeah, I mean, I was just looking at the numbers. Bureau of Labor Statistics said, I guess over the last year, under the Biden administration, there was something like 461,000 manufacturing jobs. Yeah. That's fairly impressive.
Yeah, that's more than fairly impressive. I mean, this is the first recession that, because we had the pandemic kind of induced recession, where we have added back all of the manufacturing jobs that were lost during a downturn. And not only that, we're continuing to add them. And so we're building on some of the progress that had been made from 2010 and into the early first or second year of the Trump administration. And so we're back up beyond that. And look, manufacturing isn't going to employ as many people as it did in the 70s or the 60s. There's a lot of reasons for that, globalization or automation or what have you, and the fact that we've seen a shift to services. But we can continue to grow the sector, Rick. And these policies show us, they give us the roadmap on how to do it. But it's got to be semiconductors, and then it's got to be like specialty metals, and it's got to be nanotechnologies, and it's got to be everything else that we not only want to design here and consume here, but that we want to make here as well. And I think that Biden has helped to switch the politics on this. And my hope is that, national Democrats will take heed, because for a long time, unfortunately, they didn't. And that's one of the reasons why they faced troubles, in the past.
There you go. Good stuff, Scott. As always, I appreciate you taking a little time for us. Good news, heading in the right direction. Thrilled with it. Thanks so much.
You bet. Thanks so much, Rick, for having me on. Appreciate it.
Our good friend Scott Paul, the Alliance for American Manufacturing. AmericanManufacturing.org is their website. If you want to check out the incredible work they do, we'll get links out on social media. Quick break, right back with your thoughts. 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. This is The Rick Smith Show. We're working people on the talk. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1860. That was the day that Jane Addams was born in Cedarville, Illinois. Her family was wealthy, and her father served as a state senator. In 1881, Jane Addams visited London with her friend Ellen Gates Starr. There, the two women were inspired by Toynbee Hall, a settlement house which worked with the poor and working class in the city. They decided to establish a similar effort in Chicago. They founded Hull House in an immigrant neighborhood of Italian, Greek, and Jewish workers. Hull House grew to become a complex of facilities that offered kindergarten, daycare, lectures, and cultural programs, and an important space for women trade unionists to hold meetings. The women of Hull House became one of the leading proponents for workplace safety in the nation, pushing for laws and reforms to help workers. During the 1894 Pullman workers' strike, Jane Addams visited the community and had meals with the women workers. She was able to convince the Workers' Strike Committee to agree to sit down to arbitration, but the Pullman Company officials staunchly refused to negotiate. The refusal of the company to bargain and the rising anger of the workers was an eye-opener for Jane. Later, she reflected, quote, "During all those dark days of the Pullman strike, the growth of class bitterness was most obvious." Before the strike, she wrote, quote, "There had been nothing in my experience that had revealed that distinct cleavage of society which a general strike, at least momentarily, affords." In 1931, Jane Addams was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for her lifelong advocacy for working class women and children and her strong stand for peace during World War I. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
So some good news coming out of Major League Baseball, or the Major League Baseball Players Association. They announced today that more than half of the minor leaguers who are playing in our minor leagues have signed union authorization cards, which means that they've gone to the league and to the owners of the minor league teams and said, "Hey, you can voluntarily recognize the rights of these ball players to unionize, so that they have a say, a contract, share in the wealth that their labor creates." Going to be interesting to see if the major league teams actually push for it. I could make for an interesting spring, might even make for an interesting October. But this is one of those moments where you're seeing this kind of enthusiasm around. We've had enough already. We're going to change things, and we're going to demand that we get a fair shake, that we get a fair share of what our labor creates. And seeing the minor league ball players who some of the horror stories you've heard over the years, being treated with dignity and respect going forward, I think is a good thing. To go back to something a caller said earlier, I mean, this is one of those things where I can see Major League Baseball going on strike to support their minor league brothers and sisters. I can see that. I can see a because they have the kind of power that you need to do that. I got a couple of emails from folks going, "Yeah, it's great to say Amazon should go on strike, but all of these problems." And look, there are all of these problems. But for me, this is that place where we should be in total agreement and moving in a direction that says, you know what, the wealth that our labor creates, we should share it. That's fairness. We should be fighting for better conditions, better life-work balance, better. We just came out of a pandemic where people were told they were heroes. They were essential. They mattered. And we're in a moment where I think, at least I hope, people don't want to go backwards. Now, our friend who works at UPS, there's lots of talk that UPS is going to strike next year because of a plethora of reasons. Part-time workers, not being paid well. In fact, one of the crummiest things that I've seen in a while, UPS, to get people, especially in my area, to come work as a part-timer there, they paid them I think it was $24 an hour to come in, even though the contract only says 14 or 15 to start as the wage for part-timers. And they brought them in at that rate and then said, oh, by the way, we're going to now, since you're no longer the hero and essential that we told you we're going to claw that back. And now you've got those workers who are going, wait a second. We want this. And you've got workers going, these should be full-time jobs. I go back to when I was on strike back in 1994. The freight industry went on strike at the time. And what they had wanted through their contract was what UPS has, a whole bunch of dock-type people who are part-time. They wanted to flood the docks with 4-hour casuals. And we went on strike to say, no, absolutely not. This is where we draw the line. These have to be good family-sustaining union jobs with good benefits and retirement security. This is how it has to be, and we won ultimately. I want that for our UPS brothers and sisters. I want them to be able to do that as well. And it's going to be interesting. You got a new president, Sean O'Brien. It's going to be interesting to see how this moves forward. I remember the last strike that UPS was on back, I think, 97. There could be another one. And something that I'll tell you, I'll be walking a picket line with them, and I hope that you will as well, because we've got to become that society again. And we're not there yet. We're not there yet. Approval ratings are high. People have very good opinions, and there's lots of organizing going on. But we're not that society yet that looks at other people and going, yeah, you should have the right to organize. Even though I may never be in a union, you should have that right. I think about my aunt, who, again, she's a number of years older than me, never, ever possible union member. She never was in a profession that would ever put her in, but extremely pro-union. She's the type of person who would drive by a picket line and drop off donuts or coffee or something, and has done that in the past. Because she understands that it's good for society, it's good for all of us. That when you do better, she's going to do better. That when working people do better, working people do better. And for me, that's the place where we start. That's the agreement point. Because we should at least be able to agree on that. We can fight about everything else, but that should be where we start. Love to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you miss any portion of the program, make sure you grab the podcast. Wherever you get yours, you'll find ours.
Small green plants lined the bed of what used to be a frontier lake between Switzerland and France. It's existed for 12...
KCAA Loma Linda, 1050 AM, 106.5 FM, and now 102.3 FM.